Particularly this week, there have been a few things that have happened that I want to discuss with Tom Gross, who is international affairs commentator and human rights campaigner specialising in the Middle East. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. First thing I wanted to ask you about is that the death toll for the first 16 months of the Guardian headline calls it a war in Gaza, was far higher than that which was reported. What do we know about that?
This is a report actually from the Lancet, the British medical journal. Israel disputes this. We don't actually know for sure the number of fatalities in the Gaza war. Obviously, it was very high. Some people are saying it's higher than even Hamas. Hamas claim it's, I think, 71,000 since October 2023. This report by the Lancet suggests the numbers higher. Israel suggests the numbers lower. There's also a question of how many of the fatalities were armed combatants from Hamas. Hamas themselves have named about 25,000 people who they say were their members or members of Islamic Jihad. So as in many wars, there is the so-called fog of war, and we don't know the exact numbers, but I would just make a point that this particular study, The Guardian's quoting from The Lancet does take political positions and is not necessarily regarded as a objective or neutral source.
The Lancet also reporting that 56% of the violent deaths in Gaza have been women and children as well. So thank you for updating us on that. There's also this controversial speech that was made by Tony Blair, who claimed that the crisis in Gaza was due to extremism and corruption of the Hamas-run government there, but neglected to mention Israel. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, Blair says a lot of things. Just to remind people, there is this so-called Board of Peace that Donald Trump convened a couple of days ago in Washington, in which he's gathered together a whole bunch of countries, including quite a number of Arab and Muslim countries. And Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, is going to be one of the board members. Obviously I don't speak for Blair, but I think what he has in mind was that Hamas are supposed to disarm. Hamas, as everybody knows, are a militant group or a resistance group, as they would style themselves. Under the ceasefire that was applied several months ago in Gaza, Hamas are meant to cede power and disarm. And so I think, and they have not done so, and I think what Mr. Blair is referring to is as long as Hamas are sticking around, it's hard to move ahead with reconstruction and the peace plan, because international governments and actors don't want to spend billions on reconstruction if you have a jihadi government, a Hamas government in place, which is liable to restart, a war at any time. What you need is a government in place which wants to, concentrate on building up a good, better, prosperous situation for Gazans.
And I think that it's a reasonable point to say that the Palestinians deserve a better government, or the people that live in Gaza deserve a better government. What I think where the criticism has come from is that the country which committed what several international experts are now terming a genocide in Gaza were not mentioned in terms of his assessment of why Gaza has been left in the desperate state that it's in. And Chris Doyle, who is the director of the Council of the Advancement of Arab-British Understanding, said that Blair, has scant understanding of the issues, a colonial mindset, and is addicted to cozying up to power and money, in this case Trump. And then speaking of Trump, we've got Mike Huckabee, who is the US ambassador to Israel, making some extraordinary comments this week saying that Israel has the right to take over all of the Middle East. How seriously should we take these comments, do you think?
Well, you shouldn't take it seriously at all, Natasha, because I read the report in The Guardian on quoting Huckabee, and I'm afraid The Guardian is misreporting Huckabee's comments. He didn't.
Okay, I'm reading this in the Middle East Eye, just so you know, not in The Guardian.
Okay, well, but to go to your point, clearly, look, Israel is occupying about half of Gaza following this war. Hamas is occupying another half. The ceasefire has brought a great reduction, though not a complete end, of armed fatalities and armed incidents, but it's holding up to a point. But under the ceasefire, which Hamas signed up to, they are meant to disarm. And no one, including Hamas's own backers like Qatar and Turkey, think they're also calling for Hamas to disarm. It's not just Tony Blair. So, and indeed many Palestinians are. So under the agreement that everyone signed up to for this ceasefire, we're still at stage one of a 20-point plan. So things are not going to move ahead until that happens. And obviously the prime victims or the prime beneficiaries of it moving ahead will be Gazans, will be Palestinians in Gaza, who are, many of them, still living in tents and don't have access to, full normal living conditions, proper electricity and sanitary conditions and so on. So clearly reconstruction needs to start as soon as possible. I don't think it's a problem of money because various governments such as Qatar, an ally of Hamas, UAE, have offered the money, and it's not actually that expensive. We're talking about a population of 2 million. Qatar spent more hosting the World Cup 3.5 years ago than it would cost. They did more construction for that by far. The problem again is governance. And pretty much everyone is united, apart from Hamas themselves. I should add the Palestinian Authority, under President Abbas, which governs from the West Bank. They also have called on Hamas to disarm. So,
are they around the table at the Board of Peace, the Palestinian Authority?
I'm sorry?
Are they around the table with the Board of Peace in terms of agreeing to what needs to happen next, the Palestinian Authority?
I don't know exactly how involved they are. I should point out this Board of Peace is very much a concoction of Donald Trump, and we shall see whether indeed it does bring peace, and the jury is out. But quite apart from the Board of Peace, the Palestinian Authority led by Fatah, which is the more secular Palestinian political movement, are rivals, deadly rivals of Hamas, which are the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood and are an Islamist movement. And there is no love lost between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. So,
the only reason I asked is because I can understand the rationale for not having Hamas as part of the Board of Peace, but surely you would want Palestinian representation in some form.
There's now a technocratic committee led by some Palestinian economists. Some of them, I believe one of them worked at the World Bank in Washington and so on. There is definitely Palestinian involvement with the Board of Peace. My point being is I'm not sure the Palestinians taking the lead with it rather than the Americans. But certainly there's Palestinian involvement, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that analysis. Tom Gross there, who's an international affairs commentator and human rights campaigner.